Mark Thompson was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he never let it show. At 37 years old, life had thrown more than its fair share of challenges at him. He lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by towering mountains that were often blanketed with snow during the winter months. The town itself wasn't much, just a cluster of homes, a few shops, and a diner where Mark worked most nights. It was humble, unassuming, and exactly the kind of place people passed through without giving it a second thought. But for Mark, this town was home. And though it didn't offer much in terms of opportunity or excitement, it was where he raised his daughter Lily, a bright, curious 8-year-old who had her mother's laugh and her father's determination. Losing his wife 3 years earlier to illness had left an ache in Mark's heart that hadn't healed completely. Still, every day, he woke up early to make sure Lily had breakfast before school, kissed her forehead and told her how proud he was of her. Then, after dropping her off, he headed straight to work. Mark juggled 2 part-time jobs because one paycheck simply wasn't enough to cover rent, groceries, and everything else they needed. By day, he worked as a handyman, fixing leaky faucets, patching walls, and doing odd jobs around town. By night, he served tables at the local diner where tips were unreliable, but better than nothing. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, and his clothes were worn, but none of that mattered to him. What mattered was making sure Lily had what she needed, and maybe, just maybe, saving a little bit here and there so she could go to college someday. Their apartment was modest, to say the least. The windows rattled whenever the wind picked up, and the heaters struggled to keep the chill out during the colder months. Their car, a beat-up sedan that Mark lovingly referred to as Old Faithful, spent more time in the shop than on the road. But despite all these hardships, Mark refused to let bitterness creep into his life. Instead, he focused on being grateful for what he did have: a roof over their heads, food on the table, and a daughter who brought joy to even the darkest days. One bitterly cold December evening, as a massive snowstorm rolled into town, Mark was finishing up his shift at the diner. The storm had been building throughout the day, and by now fat flakes of snow fell steadily from the sky, coating everything in sight. The roads were slick with ice, and visibility was almost non-existent. Most people had already gone home seeking warmth and safety indoors. But Mark still had one last delivery to make: a stack of burgers and fries ordered by a group of teenagers holed up at the bowling alley across town. He bundled up in his thickest jacket, pulled on his gloves, and climbed into Old Faithful, muttering under his breath about how much longer the car would hold together. The engine sputtered to life after a few tries, and Mark carefully eased onto the icy streets. Driving was tricky, but he'd lived in this town long enough to know which routes were safest. As he turned onto the highway leading out of town, the storm seemed to intensify, the wind whipping snowflakes against his windshield like tiny daggers. Just as he rounded a bend, his headlights caught something, or someone, on the side of the road. At first he thought it might be a deer or some other animal caught in the storm, but then he saw it clearly, a figure waving frantically, trying to flag him down. Mark slowed the car, his heart pounding. Who would be out here in this weather, and why? Pulling over cautiously, he rolled down his window and called out, "Are you okay?" The figure stepped closer, revealing a woman wrapped in what looked like an expensive coat. Her hair was partially covered by a scarf, and her face was flushed from the cold. She leaned down to speak to him, her breath visible in the frosty air. "Thank goodness you stopped. My car is stuck in the ditch over there and I can't get it out." Mark frowned, glancing past her toward the dark outline of a luxury vehicle half buried in the snow. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, concerned. "Not too long, I think," she replied, shivering. "I lost signal on my phone, and no one else has driven by. Please, can you help me?" Mark hesitated. He was already running late, and Lily would be waiting for him at home. But looking at the woman standing there, clearly freezing and stranded, he couldn't bring himself to leave her behind. Helping others was something he'd always done, even when it wasn't convenient. It was part of who he was. "All right," he said finally, climbing out of the car. "Let's see what we can do." As he approached the Mercedes, he noticed how out of place it seemed in this rugged landscape. This wasn't the kind of car you'd expect to find abandoned in a snowstorm. It belonged to someone wealthy, someone important. But Mark didn't dwell on that. Instead, he focused on assessing the situation. The tires were spinning uselessly against the packed snow and the car showed no signs of budging. "There's no way you're getting this thing unstuck tonight," he said, turning back to the woman. "You'll freeze if you stay out here. Let me give you a ride into town. We can call a tow truck once we're safe." The woman nodded gratefully, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate this." "No problem," Mark replied, brushing off her gratitude. "It's what anyone would do." On the drive back to town, the woman introduced herself as Evelyn Carter. She explained that she'd been traveling for business when her GPS malfunctioned, leading her off course and into the storm. Mark listened quietly, nodding occasionally as he navigated the treacherous roads. When she asked about him, he hesitated before sharing bits and pieces of his story: the loss of his wife, raising Lily alone, working multiple jobs to make ends. Meet Evelyn listened intently, her expression softening as she took in the details of his life. There was something about Mark's humility and resilience that struck a chord with her. Here was a man who had every reason to feel defeated by life, yet he chose kindness instead. Little did Mark know, this seemingly ordinary act of generosity would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the storm had begun to ease slightly, though the world outside remained blanketed in white. Mark pulled up to a cozy inn where Evelyn could stay for the night. Before stepping out of the car, she turned to him and said, "I won't forget this, Mark. Thank you for everything." He smiled faintly, unsure of what to say. "Just glad I could help." And with that, she disappeared into the warmth of the inn, leaving Mark to continue his journey home. As he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. But for now, all he wanted was to get back to Lily and hold her close, grateful for another day survived in their unpredictable little corner of the world. The next morning dawned cold and crisp, the kind of day where the sun hung low in the sky but didn't quite manage to warm anything. Mark woke up early, as he always did, to start his routine. He shuffled into the kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee, and glanced out the window at the snow-covered streets. The storm from the previous night had left its mark, transforming the town into a glittering wonderland of white. It was beautiful, sure, but also a reminder of the challenges that came with living in such a remote place. Lily was still asleep, curled up under her blanket like a little burrito. Mark smiled at the sight of her, feeling the familiar swell of love and responsibility in his chest. She was the reason he kept going, even on the hardest days. He tiptoed out of her room and headed back to the kitchen to finish his coffee before starting another long day of work. Just as he was about to grab his coat and head out, there was a knock at the door. Frowning, Mark set his mug down and went to answer it. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Evelyn standing there, holding a tray laden with steaming cups of coffee and freshly baked pastries. Her expensive coat was gone, replaced by a simple wool sweater and jeans, but she still carried herself with an air of quiet confidence. "Good morning," she said with a smile, stepping inside before Mark could protest. "I brought breakfast. I hope you don't mind." Mark blinked, caught off guard. No, not at all. Come in, please." She walked past him and placed the tray on the small dining table. The smell of buttery croissants and rich coffee filled the tiny apartment, making Mark's stomach rumble, despite the awkwardness of the situation. Evelyn turned to face him, her expression soft but serious. "I wanted to thank you again for last night," she said. "You saved me from freezing out there, and I'll never forget that." Mark waved a hand dismissively, though he couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride at her words. It was nothing, really. Anyone would have done the same. Evelyn shook, her head firmly. "Not everyone would have stopped, Mark. You didn't know me and you had no reason to trust me. But you did it anyway. That kind of kindness is rare these days." Her words made Mark uncomfortable, not because they weren't true, but because he didn't think of himself as particularly special. To him, helping someone in need was just the right thing to do. Still, he appreciated her gratitude and decided to change the subject. "So, how's your car?" he asked, gesturing toward the tray. "Help yourself if you're hungry." Evelyn laughed softly and took a seat at the table. "The tow truck got it out this morning. It's fine now, thanks to you. And don't worry, I ate already. This is for you and Lily." At the mention of her name, Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. When she saw Evelyn, her face lit up with curiosity. "Who's this?" she asked, looking at Mark. "This is Evelyn," Mark replied. "She stopped by to say thank you for something I did last night." Lily tilted her head, her blonde hair sticking out in every direction. "Did you rescue her or something?" Evelyn chuckled, clearly amused by the question. "Something like that," she said. "Your dad was very brave." Lily beamed at the compliment, clearly proud of her father. "He's always doing stuff like that," she said matter-of-factly. "Once he fixed Mrs. Henderson's roof when it leaked, and she gave us cookies." Mark groaned playfully, though he couldn't hide the affection in his voice. Okay, enough stories. Why don't you sit down and eat? These croissants look amazing." As they settled around the table, Evelyn watched the interaction between Mark and Lily with a mixture of fascination and admiration. There was an easy rhythm to their relationship, a bond that felt unbreakable despite the hardships they faced. She found herself envying them in a way, envying the simplicity of their lives, the way they seemed to find joy even in the smallest things. After a few minutes of casual conversation, Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her tone turning more serious. "Mark, I've been thinking about something. Last night you mentioned working 2 jobs and struggling to make ends meet. Is that still the case?" Mark hesitated, unsure of how much to share. Talking about money, or the lack of it, wasn't something he enjoyed doing, especially with someone he barely knew. But Evelyn's gaze was steady and there was no judgment in her voice, only genuine concern. "Yeah," he admitted finally. "It's tough sometimes, but we get by. Lily's happy, and that's what matters." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. But I want to help. What you did for me last night, it meant a lot. More than you realize. I'd like to repay you somehow." Mark immediately shook his head. "No, that's not necessary, really. I didn't do it expecting anything in return." "I know," Evelyn said quickly. "And that's exactly why I want to do this. People like you deserve a break, Mark. Someone who works so hard and still finds time to help others. You're rare." Before Mark could argue further, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek black folder. Inside were several sheets of paper, neatly printed and organized. She slid one across the table toward him. "What's this?" Mark asked, picking it up cautiously. "It's a job offer," Evelyn explained. "I run a company called Solar Nova. We specialize in renewable energy technology, and we're expanding our charitable foundation. I'd like you to lead the community outreach program. It's a full-time position with benefits, and I think you'd be perfect for it." Mark stared at the paper, his mind racing. The salary listed was more than he'd ever dreamed of earning, and the responsibilities sounded meaningful. Working directly with communities to bring clean energy solutions to underserved areas. But it all felt too good to be true. "I don't know what to say," he stammered. "This is incredible, but I'm just a handyman and a diner waiter. I don't have any experience running programs like this." "You underestimate yourself," Evelyn said firmly. "From what I've seen, you're smart, resourceful, and deeply committed to helping others. Those are the qualities I value most. Besides, we'll provide training and support. All you need is the willingness to learn." Mark glanced at Lily, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "What do you think, kiddo?" he asked lightly. "Should I take the fancy new job?" Lily grinned. "Yes, then we can fix Old Faithful and maybe even get a dog." Despite the light-hearted comment, Mark felt a lump form in his throat. For years, he'd sacrificed everything to give Lily a stable life, often putting his own dreams on hold. Now here was an opportunity to build something better, not just for himself, but for her too. Could he really turn it down? I'll need some time to think about it, he said finally, looking back at Evelyn. But thank you, really. This means a lot. Evelyn smiled warmly. Take all the time you need. Just promise me you'll consider it seriously. I will, Mark promised. And as he watched her gather her things and prepare to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Later that afternoon, after Evelyn had gone and Lily was busy playing with her toys, Mark sat alone at the table staring at the job offer. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: gratitude, excitement, fear, doubt. Was he ready for something like this? Could he step into a role that seemed so far removed from his current reality? But deep down he knew the answer. He'd spent years surviving, scraping by, and doing whatever it took to keep moving forward. Maybe it was time to try thriving instead. A few days passed, and Mark couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn's offer. The job proposal sat on his kitchen table, the crisp paper glaring at him every time he walked by. It wasn't just the salary or the benefits that weighed on his mind. It was the idea of stepping into a completely new world, one he'd never imagined for himself. He'd spent years fixing leaky faucets, serving food to strangers, and patching together a life out of scraps. Now, here was an opportunity to do something bigger, something meaningful. But could he really pull it off? Lily noticed her dad's distraction. Normally, Mark was the kind of guy who could fix anything with a smile and a joke. Whether it was a broken toy or a burnt dinner, he always found a way to make things better. But lately, he seemed quieter, lost in thought. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching an old movie, she turned to him and asked, "Dad, are you okay? You look like you're trying to solve a puzzle." Mark chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. "Something like that, kiddo. I've got a big decision to make and I'm not sure what to do." "Is it about that lady from the other day?" Lily asked innocently. "The one with the fancy car?" Mark nodded, surprised by how observant his daughter was. "Yeah, it's about Evelyn. She offered me a new job, but it's different from what I'm used to." Lily tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think you'd be good at it?" "I hope so," Mark replied honestly. "But it's scary too. What if I mess up? What if I can't handle it?" "You won't," Lily said firmly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're the best problem solver I know. Remember when Old Faithful broke down last winter? You fixed it even though everyone said it was impossible." Mark smiled at the memory. That had been a long, cold night spent tinkering under the hood of their ancient sedan, but somehow he'd managed to get it running again. Still, this felt different. Fixing a car was one thing. Leading a team and managing projects for a major company was another. Before he could dwell on it further, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Evelyn again. She looked slightly winded, as if she'd been walking briskly through the snow-covered streets. When Mark opened the door, she greeted him with a warm smile and held up a thermos. "I come bearing hot chocolate," she announced cheerfully, "and maybe some answers to your questions." Mark stepped aside to let her in, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. He appreciated her persistence, but part of him wondered if he was getting in over his head. As they settled into the living room, Evelyn handed him a mug of steaming hot chocolate and took a seat across from him. "So," she began, her tone light but serious, "have you had a chance to think about my offer?" Mark nodded slowly, sipping the hot chocolate. It was rich and sweet, a small comfort against the swirling thoughts in his mind. "I have," he admitted. "It's a lot to take in. I've never done anything like this before. I'm not sure I'm qualified." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Let me tell you something, Mark. Qualifications are important, sure, but they're not everything. What matters most is character. How you treat people, how you approach challenges, how you lead by example. From what I've seen, you have all those qualities in spades." Mark frowned, unsure how to respond. Compliments weren't something he heard often, and they made him uncomfortable. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But this isn't just about me. If I accept, it'll affect Lily too. I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing for both of us." Evelyn nodded understandingly. "Of course. Family comes first. That's something I respect deeply. And trust me, I wouldn't have offered you this position if I didn't believe you could succeed. Solar Nova's foundation is about making a difference in communities, and I think you'd be incredible at that. But I also understand if you're hesitant. Change is hard, especially when it feels so sudden." Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just the change, though, it's you. You're offering me this amazing opportunity, and I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of your gratitude." Evelyn's expression softened, and she reached out to place a reassuring hand on his arm. "Mark, listen to me. Yes, I'm grateful for what you did that night, but this isn't charity. This is an investment. In you, in your skills, in your potential. You helped me without expecting anything in return. Now, I'm asking you to let me help you in a way that benefits everyone." Her words struck a chord, deep within him. For so long, Mark had believed that his struggles defined him, that he was destined to scrape by forever. But sitting there, listening to Evelyn speak with such conviction, he began to see a glimmer of possibility, a chance to rewrite his story, not just for himself, but for Lily too. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him since the moment she'd handed him the job offer. Evelyn smiled gently. "Failure isn't the end, Mark. It's part of the process. We learn, we grow, we try again. And if you ever need support, I'll be there to help. You figure it out. You won't be alone in this." For the first time in days, Mark felt a sense of calm wash over him. Maybe he didn't have all the answers yet, but he realized that was okay. Life was messy, unpredictable, and full of risks. What mattered was having the courage to take the next step, even if it scared him. That evening after Evelyn left, Mark sat down with Lily and explained everything. He told her about the job, the responsibilities, and the opportunities it might bring. He also shared his fears, wanting her to understand that no decision came without challenges. To his surprise, Lily listened intently, and then gave him the same advice she always did. "Just go for it, Dad. You've got this." The next morning, Mark called Evelyn and accepted the offer. Her voice on the other end of the line was filled with excitement and pride. "Welcome to the team, Mark," she said warmly. "You're going to do amazing things." As the weeks went by, Mark dove into training, learning everything he could about Solar Nova's mission and the Foundation's goals. At first, it was overwhelming. There were meetings, reports, and strategies to master, but he quickly discovered that his background as a handyman and a diner worker gave him unique insights. He understood the value of hard work, communication, and finding creative solutions to problems. Slowly but surely, he began to find his footing. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued to check in on him, offering guidance and encouragement whenever he needed it. Their interactions grew more frequent, and Mark found himself looking forward to their conversations. There was something about Evelyn that intrigued him, not just her intelligence or her success, but the way she carried herself with grace and humility despite her wealth and influence. She wasn't the type of person who flaunted her status. Instead, she used it to uplift others, and Mark admired that deeply. One afternoon, as they reviewed plans for an upcoming project, Evelyn paused and looked at him thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "when I first met you, I thought you were just a kind stranger helping me out of a bad situation. But now I realize there's so much more to you than that. You inspire me, Mark. Your strength, your resilience. They remind me of why I started Solar Nova in the first place." Mark felt his cheeks flush, embarrassed by the praise. "I don't know about all that," he muttered. "I'm just trying to keep up." "You're doing more than keeping up," Evelyn said firmly. "You're thriving, and I'm lucky to have you on my team." As the days turned into months, Mark's confidence grew. He threw himself into his work, pouring his heart into every project and initiative. The foundation flourished under his leadership, bringing solar panels to rural schools, funding clean water programs, and empowering communities to build sustainable futures. People began to notice, not just Evelyn, but others in the company, and beyond. Mark Thompson, the broke single dad who once struggled to pay rent, was becoming a force to be reckoned with. Through it all, Lily remained his anchor. She loved hearing about his work, especially the stories of children whose lives were being changed by the Foundation's efforts. "You're like a superhero, Dad," she told him one evening as they ate dinner together. "Except instead of a cape, you wear that tie Evelyn gave you." Mark laughed, shaking his head. "If I'm a superhero, then you're my sidekick. None of this would be possible without you cheering me on." As winter melted into spring, Mark reflected on how far he'd come. A chance encounter during a snowstorm had set off a chain of events that transformed his life in ways he never could have predicted. He still had moments of doubt, of course, times when the weight of responsibility felt heavy, but he faced them with the same determination that had carried him through every challenge before. And somewhere along the way, he realized that Evelyn wasn't just his boss or mentor anymore. She had become a friend, a confidant, and perhaps something even more. But that was a story for another day. For now, Mark was content to focus on the present, grateful for the second chance he'd been given, and eager to see where this new chapter of his life would lead. As the months rolled by, Mark's life began to transform in ways he could never have imagined. The job at Solar Nova wasn't just a position, it was an entirely new chapter, one that brought challenges, growth, and unexpected opportunities. Every day felt like stepping into uncharted territory, but Mark embraced it with the same determination that had carried him through years of hardship. Slowly but surely, he started to see himself not as the struggling handyman or diner waiter, but as someone capable of making a real difference. Lily noticed the change in her dad, too. He seemed lighter, more confident and happier than she'd seen him in years. Gone were the days when he came home exhausted, his shoulders sagging under the weight of endless worries. Now, he walked through the door with stories about the people he'd met, the projects he'd worked on, and the communities he'd helped. His eyes sparkled with excitement, and Lily couldn't help but feel proud of him. But it wasn't just Mark who was changing. Their relationship with Evelyn deepened, as well. What had started as professional admiration grew into something more personal. Evelyn visited often, sometimes stopping by the office to check in on Mark's progress, other times swinging by their apartment for dinner or coffee. She loved hearing about Lily's school projects and even joined them for weekend outings to the park or local festivals. Over time, she became a regular part of their lives, blending seamlessly into their little family unit. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mark and Evelyn found themselves working late at the Foundation headquarters. They were preparing for a major event, a gala to raise funds for a solar energy initiative aimed at bringing electricity to remote villages in developing countries. The project was close to both their hearts, and they poured hours into perfecting every detail. By the time they finished, the sun had long since set, leaving the office bathed in soft lamplight. "You've done incredible work on this," Evelyn said, leaning back in her chair and stretching. "I don't think I've ever seen someone so dedicated." Mark smiled modestly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm just trying to keep up with you. You're the one who dreamed all this up." Evelyn shook her head. "It takes more than dreams to make things happen, Mark. It takes people like you, people who care enough to turn those dreams into reality." Her words lingered in the air, between them, heavy with meaning. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet hum of the office lights filled the space, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of papers. Then Evelyn stood, grabbing her coat from the back of the chair. "Let me give you a ride home," she said. "It's late and you've earned a break." Mark hesitated, glancing at his own car parked outside. "Are you sure? I don't want to inconvenience you." "It's no trouble," Evelyn insisted. "Besides, we need to talk about something important." Curiosity piqued. Mark grabbed his jacket and followed her to her car. The drive back to his apartment was peaceful, the streets deserted except for the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance. As they pulled up to the curb, Evelyn turned off the engine but didn't move to leave. Instead, she faced him, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but steady. "About us." Mark froze, his heart skipping a beat. "Us?" he echoed, unsure of what she meant. Evelyn nodded, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Yes, us. I know we started out as boss and employee, but over the past few months I've come to realize that there's more between us than that. Don't you feel it too?" Mark swallowed hard, his mind racing. He'd thought about this plenty of times. How much he enjoyed her company, how comfortable he felt around her, how she made him laugh and challenged him to be better. But he'd always dismissed it as wishful thinking. After all, what could someone like Evelyn possibly see in him? "I don't know what to say," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything right now," Evelyn replied gently. "I just wanted to put it out there. Life is short, Mark, and I've learned the hard way that you shouldn't waste time pretending you don't feel something when you do." Her honesty took his breath away. Here was a woman who had everything: wealth, success, influence, and yet she chose to sit in his tiny apartment building parking lot, pouring her heart out to him. It was humbling, overwhelming, and incredibly brave. "I feel it too," Mark said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I just didn't think someone like you would." "Someone like me?" Evelyn interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're amazing, Evelyn. You've got this whole world at your fingertips. And me? I'm just a guy trying to get by." Evelyn reached across the console, placing her hand over his. "That's exactly why I admire you, Mark. You're kind, humble, and genuine. All qualities I rarely find in the circles I move in. You remind me of what truly matters: family, compassion, integrity. Those are the things I value most." Her touch sent a jolt of warmth through him, melting away some of the doubts that had been holding him back. Maybe he wasn't perfect, and maybe he didn't fit into Evelyn's glamorous world perfectly, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the connection they shared, the mutual respect and understanding that had grown between them. "Okay," Mark said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Let's see where this goes." Evelyn's face lit up with relief and happiness. "Thank you for trusting me, Mark. That means everything." From that night on, their relationship shifted. They spent more time together outside of work, exploring the town, sharing meals and talking late into the night about their hopes and dreams. Evelyn introduced Mark to her friends and colleagues, many of whom were initially surprised by the pairing, but quickly warmed to him once they saw how much he cared for her. In turn, Mark introduced Evelyn to his circle, the neighbors, the shopkeepers, the teachers at Lily's school. Everyone adored her, especially Lily, who declared Evelyn the coolest person ever after she taught her how to bake chocolate chip cookies. Their bond deepened further during the holidays. When Christmas rolled around, Evelyn invited Mark and Lily to spend it at her mountain estate, a sprawling property nestled among towering pine trees and blanketed in snow. It was a far cry from their modest apartment, but Evelyn went out of her way to make them feel at home. She decorated the house with twinkling lights, baked dozens of treats, and even let Lily build a snowman in the backyard, while Mark helped her hang stockings by the fireplace. For Mark, it was a surreal experience. Growing up, Christmas had always been a simple affair: a tree strung with mismatched ornaments, a few presents wrapped in recycled paper, and a meal cobbled together from whatever they could afford. But here, surrounded by luxury and love, he realized that the magic of the season wasn't about material things. It was about being with the people who mattered most. On Christmas morning, as they sat together drinking hot cocoa and watching Lily tear into her gifts, Evelyn leaned over and whispered, "This feels right, doesn't it?" Mark looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "More than right," he replied. "Perfect." As the year drew to a close, Mark reflected on how far he'd come. From a broke single dad struggling to make ends meet to a leader at one of the most innovative companies in the world, his journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. But more than the career change or the financial stability, What truly amazed him was the sense of belonging he'd found, with Evelyn, with Lily, and with himself. He knew there would still be challenges ahead. Balancing work, family, and AI. Budding romance wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Mark felt ready to face whatever came his way. With Evelyn by his side and Lily cheering him on, he believed anything was possible. As spring arrived, the world seemed to wake up alongside Mark and Evelyn. The snow melted away, revealing green grass and blooming flowers, and their relationship blossomed in much the same way. What had started as a quiet understanding between them grew into something deeper, more profound. They weren't just colleagues or friends anymore. They were partners, sharing not only their lives but also their dreams for the future. Evelyn continued to play a big role in Mark's life, both personally and professionally. At work, she trusted him completely, giving him the freedom to lead projects and make decisions that aligned with the Foundation's mission. Under his guidance, Solar Nova's charitable initiatives flourished. Entire communities gained access to clean energy, schools received solar panels, and families who once lived without electricity now had light in their homes. Every success felt like a shared victory, and Evelyn often told Mark how proud she was of what they'd accomplished together. Outside of work, their connection deepened even further. They spent weekends exploring nearby towns, hiking through the mountains, or simply relaxing at Evelyn's estate. Sometimes Lily joined them, her laughter filling the air as she chased butterflies or built forts out of blankets. Other times, it was just the two of them, enjoying quiet moments that spoke volumes about the bond they shared. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Evelyn suggested they take a walk along the lake near her property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the water shimmered like glass. As they strolled side by side, Evelyn turned to Mark with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking about stepping back from my CEO role," she said suddenly, her voice soft but firm. Mark stopped in his tracks, surprised. "What? Why?" Evelyn smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because I want to focus on what truly matters, the foundation, the people we're helping, and us. Running a company is demanding, and while I'm proud of what I've built, I realize now that there's more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets." Mark frowned, unsure of how to respond. "Are you sure? You've poured so much of yourself into Solar Nova. It's your legacy." "It was my legacy," Evelyn corrected gently. "But now I see an opportunity to create something new, something bigger, and I can't do that if I'm tied down to a desk all day." Mark nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Evelyn wasn't the kind of person to settle for anything less than what she truly wanted. If she felt called to step away from the corporate world, then he knew she'd approach it with the same passion and purpose she brought to everything else. "So, what does this mean for you?" he asked. "What's next?" Evelyn's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I want to dedicate myself fully to the Foundation, expand its reach, take on bigger projects, and maybe even inspire others to follow in our footsteps. But most importantly, I want to do it with you by my side." Her words sent a wave of warmth through him, but they also came with a weight of responsibility. Leading the Foundation was already a huge task, and now Evelyn was entrusting him with even more. Could he live up to her expectations? Could he be the partner she needed? "You know I'll support you no matter what," Mark said finally. "But are you sure about this, about me?" Evelyn reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Absolutely. You've shown me what true leadership looks like, not just in business, but in life. You care about people, Mark. That's rare, and it's exactly what we need to make a real difference." Her faith in him was humbling, and Mark resolved to rise to the occasion. Together, they began planning the next phase of the Foundation's growth. Evelyn used her influence to secure partnerships with other organizations, while Mark focused on implementing programs that directly impacted communities. Their teamwork was seamless, each playing to their strengths and complementing the other perfectly. Meanwhile, Lily continued to thrive under the positive changes in her dad's life. She adored Evelyn, treating her like a second mom, and loved hearing stories about the places they traveled to for work. One weekend, Evelyn took them all to visit one of the villages where the foundation had installed solar panels. Seeing the joy on the villagers' faces as they turned on lights for the first time left a lasting impression on Lily. "Dad, this is so cool," she exclaimed, watching children play under newly lit street lamps. "You're changing the world." Mark chuckled, ruffling her hair. "We're changing it together, kiddo." Lily grinned, wrapping her arms around his waist. "And Evelyn, too. She's awesome." Hearing those words made Evelyn beam with pride. Watching Mark and Lily interact reminded her of why she'd fallen for him in the first place. He wasn't just a great leader, he was an incredible father, putting his daughter's happiness above everything else. It was a quality she admired deeply. As summer approached, Evelyn decided to host a special event at her estate, a celebration of the foundation's achievements over the past year. Guests included donors, volunteers, and representatives from the communities they'd helped. It was a night filled with speeches, music, and heartfelt gratitude, culminating in a stunning fireworks display over the lake. During the festivities, Evelyn pulled Mark aside for a private moment. "There's something I want to ask you," she said, her tone serious yet tender. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Evelyn looked into his eyes. "Mark, you've saved me in more ways than one. That night, in the snowstorm, you rescued me from freezing. Since then, you've shown me what it means to live with purpose, kindness, and love. I can't imagine my life without you in it. So here's my question. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Mark stood frozen, his mind struggling to process her words. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "Yes," he whispered, pulling her into a tight embrace. 1,000 times yes. The engagement marked a new chapter for both of them. Planning the wedding became a family affair, with Lily eagerly helping choose decorations and Evelyn consulting Mark on every detail. They kept things simple yet meaningful, opting for a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and loved ones. On the day of the wedding, as Mark stood waiting at the altar, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. From a broke single dad barely scraping by to a man about to marry the love of his life, his journey had been nothing short of miraculous. When Evelyn walked down the aisle, radiant in a flowing white gown, Mark felt his heart swell with emotion. This was it, the moment he'd dreamed of but never thought possible. As they exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin, tears streamed down Lily's cheeks. She clutched a bouquet of wildflowers, beaming with pride as she watched her dad and Evelyn seal their commitment with a kiss. Afterward, during the reception, guests shared stories of how Mark and Evelyn had touched their lives. Villagers spoke of the light they'd brought to their homes. Colleagues praised their dedication to the foundation, and friends celebrated the love that had grown between them. It was a night filled with laughter, dancing, and countless reminders of the impact they'd made together. As the party wound down and the stars emerged overhead, Mark found himself reflecting on everything that had led him to this point. A random act of kindness during a snowstorm had changed his life in ways he could never have predicted. It had introduced him to Evelyn, given him a career he was passionate about, and allowed him to provide a brighter future for Lily. Most importantly, it had taught him that sometimes the smallest gestures can lead to the greatest rewards. With Evelyn by his side and Lily holding his hand, Mark felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Life wouldn't always be easy. There would still be challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. But he faced them with unwavering hope. Together, they were building something extraordinary. A family rooted in love, a foundation dedicated to making the world a better place, and a partnership that proved even the most unlikely. Beginnings could lead to happily ever afters. Years passed, and life for Mark, Evelyn, and Lily settled into a rhythm that was both fulfilling and joyful. Their days were filled with purpose, working together to expand the reach of SolarNova's foundation, traveling to communities around the world, and witnessing firsthand the transformative power of clean energy. But beyond the professional achievements lay something even more precious. A family built on love, trust, and shared dreams. Evelyn officially stepped down as CEO of Solar Nova, passing the reins to a trusted colleague while she focused entirely on the foundation. Her decision turned out to be the right one. Not only did it allow her to dedicate more time to meaningful projects, but it also gave her the freedom to nurture her relationship with Mark and Lily. Together, they became a tight-knit team, balancing work and family life in a way that felt natural and harmonious. Mark continued to thrive in his role as head of the foundation. Under his leadership, the organization launched initiatives that brought solar panels to schools in rural Africa, provided clean water systems to villages in South America, and trained local leaders to maintain sustainable energy solutions. Every success story fueled his passion further, reminding him why he'd accepted Evelyn's offer all those years ago. He wasn't just helping people, he was empowering them to build better futures for themselves. Lily grew into a bright, confident teenager who idolized both her parents. She loved spending summers volunteering with the foundation, teaching kids how to use solar-powered devices, or helping plant trees in deforested areas. Her favorite part, though, was seeing the smiles on people's faces when they realized their lives were improving because of her dad's work, and by extension, hers too. "We're like superheroes," she once joked to Evelyn during a trip to India. "Except instead of capes, we wear sunscreen." Evelyn laughed at the comment, but deep down she agreed. To her, Mark and Lily weren't just family, they were inspirations. They reminded her daily of the importance of kindness, resilience, and believing in possibilities. Watching Mark transform from a struggling handyman to a global changemaker filled her with pride, while Lily's infectious optimism kept her grounded and hopeful. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Mark and Evelyn stood side by side on a hill overlooking a small village in Nepal. The community had recently installed solar panels thanks to the foundation's efforts, and today marked the official unveiling ceremony. Villagers gathered around, their faces glowing with excitement as children played under newly lit street lamps. It was a scene Mark and Evelyn had witnessed countless times before, yet each moment felt uniquely special. As speeches concluded and applause echoed through the air, Evelyn turned to Mark with a thoughtful smile. "Do you ever stop and think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. Mark nodded, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "All the time. Sometimes it feels surreal, you know? Like, how did I end up here?" Evelyn slipped her hand into his, squeezing gently. "You ended up here because you chose to help someone in need. That one act of kindness set everything else in motion." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Funny how life works, isn't it? If I hadn't stopped that night, none of this would have happened. And if I hadn't been stuck in that ditch," Evelyn added with a grin, "we might never have met." They shared a quiet laugh, savoring the irony of fate. What had begun as a chance encounter in a snowstorm had blossomed into a partnership that changed not only their lives, but countless others. It was proof that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, creating waves of positivity. Back home, their bond continued to deepen. While their schedules remained busy, they made it a point to carve out time for each other. Weekends were reserved for hikes, cooking meals together, or simply sitting by the fireplace with cups of tea. These moments of stillness allowed them to reconnect, reminding them of what truly mattered amidst the whirlwind of responsibilities. Lily, now a high school senior, began thinking about college. She dreamed of studying environmental science inspired by her parents' work. "I want to carry on what you guys started," she told them one evening over dinner, "but maybe I'll focus on finding new ways to protect the planet." Mark beamed with pride, his heart swelling at the thought of his daughter following in their footsteps. "Whatever you choose, we'll support you," he said, glancing at Evelyn. "Right?" "Absolutely," Evelyn agreed. "Your future is yours to shape, Lily. Just promise us you'll always stay true to yourself." "I will," Lily promised, smiling brightly, "and I'll make you proud." The years ahead held challenges, as they always do. There were moments of doubt, disagreements, and setbacks, but through it all, Mark and Evelyn faced them together. Their love for each other, combined with their commitment to making the world a better place, served as an anchor during difficult times. And whenever things felt overwhelming, they reminded themselves of the journey that had brought them here. A random act of kindness, a leap of faith, and an unshakable belief in the goodness of humanity. On a quiet winter evening several years later, Mark sat by the window of their cozy living room, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. The house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and pine from the Christmas tree in the corner. Evelyn joined him, handing him a mug of hot cocoa before settling onto the couch beside him. "You remember that night?" she asked, her voice soft. "The storm, the car, everything?" Mark smiled, taking a sip of his drink. "How could I forget? It changed my life." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, gazing out at the snowy landscape. "It changed mine too. I used to think success was all about money and titles, but now I know it's about connection, about finding someone who sees the best in you even when you can't see it yourself." Mark wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Well, I'm glad I saw it in you. You've done amazing things, Evelyn. Things I never thought possible." "And so have you," she replied, looking up at him. "Together we've created something extraordinary, something that will last long after we're gone." Their conversation drifted off as they sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on the life they'd built. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, a reminder of the storm that had brought them together all those years ago. But inside, warmth radiated through every corner of their home, a testament to the love, hope, and determination that had carried them through. Later that night, as Mark tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad, do you think anyone else will get lucky like you did? Like meeting someone amazing because of a snowstorm?" Mark paused, considering the question. Then he smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Maybe. Or maybe it's not about luck. Maybe it's about being willing to help, even when it's hard. Kindness has a way of coming back to you, kiddo. Always remember that." Lily yawned, snuggling deeper under her blankets. "Okay, I'll try to be kind like you." "You already are," Mark said, kissing her goodnight. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." As he closed her bedroom door and returned to the living room, Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Life hadn't always been easy, but it had been worth it. Through hardship and triumph, loss and love, he'd discovered that the greatest rewards came not from material wealth or personal accolades, but from the connections we forge and the impact we leave behind. Sitting beside Evelyn, holding her hand as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Mark realized something. Their story wasn't just about two people brought together by circumstance. It was about the power of kindness, the strength of partnership, and the boundless potential of human connection. It was a story they would pass down to Lily, and someday perhaps to grandchildren who would carry its lessons forward. And as the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in quiet beauty, Mark knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, they would face it together, with open hearts, unwavering courage, and the enduring belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the world.